from Naysabur. What does that say?
It says it's being live streamed.
I think you have to click got it before to continue. Not touch screen, brother.
Sorry.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, grab the book and join us.
We're good now.
So, Abdul Malik, Imam al-Juwayni, Imam al-Haramain, we said that he is a scholar in the Shafi'i madhab and a scholar in usul. And this is one of the simplest works that he has written on the topic of usul al-fiqh. So then he says, هذه ورقات, that the following is a few pages, right? A gathering of pages together. تشتمل على معرفة, like it combines together. It's going to go over, knowledge, understanding of fusul min usul al-fiqh. And fusul is, portions of it. There's going to be masail that are going to be combined, and when you combine them, they become fusul. And when you combine fusul together, they become abwab. You combine the abwab together, they become kitab. Right? So this is how they would, structure their books and so on. So here he's saying, this is just, you're going to go step by step over masail, over like things that you have to be aware of, min usul al-fiqh, from usul al-fiqh. And the reason that, he introduces the book this way, it is to tell you that this is not going to be something that is lengthy. You're not going to, it's not going to take you forever to go through it. It's just a gathering of some small pages that deal with masail. So you're not even going to be able to see some proofs in here, really. Right? He doesn't tell you why this is like this. This is the proof for why I'm saying this. All it is I'm introducing you to the topics that are discussed in usul al-fiqh and what they cover. And this is to, to encourage you to, hey, you're going to get through this quickly. So the encouragement comes in the beginning. And he says, وَذَلِكَ لَفْظٌ مُؤَلَّفٌ مِنْ جُزْئَيْنِ مُفْرَدَيْنِ. That usul al-fiqh, this is a statement that is composed or made up of two things, right? Usul and fiqh. And what he's going to do here is he's going to break it down by separating these two words. First telling you what usul means and then telling you what fiqh means, right? And this is one of the ways that you could translate things. Like today, if we said the floorboard, we know the floorboard to be, what's on the floor. Or we could say, the floor, this is what it means, and the board, this is what it means. Like the cupboard. It's where you put the cups. You have the cup, the dishwasher, right? You could define it in two ways. The dishwasher as the machine itself, or the place where you wash the dishes and car wash and things like that. Or you just take it together and you combine it together. So he says the way that he's going to define it is he's going to break it down for you. And throughout the book, anything that he says, and he thinks that it's important for us to know, he breaks it down for you. So he says, أحدهما, one of those words is usul. والآخر, the other one of it is fiqh. So I want you to understand these two things. So he says, فالأصل, and this is the singular form of usul. He says, ما بني عليه غيره. He says the asl is the foundation, and everything else is built on that foundation. Everything else is built on that foundation. And then here he says, والفرع. He says, he gives another word that he hasn't mentioned yet. And he says, ما بني عليه غيره. That is what you, or ما بني على غيره. It's what do you build others on top of. Right? You have the foundation and the things that are, placed on top of it. That is called the fara. And the reason he's bringing is to give you a stronger understanding of al-usul or al-asl. What does it mean? It's something that you build upon. What's the opposite of this? The things that you build upon it. So when you get here, it's like, okay, this is what the first word of the thing is, foundation. Then he says, wal-fiqhu. He just gave you the meaning of asl. He says, wal-fiqhu ma'rifatul ahkam. We'll go word by word here. It's very important. He says, ma'rifa. It is knowledge. And knowledge is broken down into two parts. You have knowledge that for certain, this is knowledge. And then you have another aspect of knowledge, which is, dhanni, where it's like, it is probably like this, right? Where there's like that, you don't have that certainty to it. So ma'rifa here is ilm, and it encompasses every knowledge. Everything that we know, it's here. And then he says, okay, let us now, make a little bit of a change. Let's restrict this understanding. He says, al-ahkam. It says rulings. Now it's not just knowledge, but it is knowledge that pertain to rulings. You've removed a lot of things already, right? Not only rulings. And then he goes, from there, let's even restrict it even more. Ash-Shar'iyya, rulings of Shar'iyya, rulings that have to do with the deen, with the Sharia. And then he says, التي طريقها الاجتهاد, that the way that you're going to get to it, it is you have made it through striving. Now, our brother Hisham, he's here. Last week he asked, this التي, what does it point to? Is it talking about the ahkam or the ma'rifah? And I said the ahkam. If we say that it points to the ahkam, even if we were to do ijtihad, if we strove and came to a ruling, that would be, this allati would point to the ahkam. Whatever we get to the books, even if we're just following along, it would be here. But the allati here now is to the ma'rifah. That the ma'rifah of coming, that gathering that knowledge is through ijtihad. Not gathering the rulings, but the knowledge of the rulings. Make it, inshallah, wider. Then, ahkam al-shar'iyya, most of, the scholars, when they explain this book, they add another word, and that is al-amaliyya, right? Rulings that pertain to actions that we do. And the reason why they do this, because they want to separate this knowledge of usul fiqh or fiqh itself from things that have to do, for example, with aqeedah, right? Is fiqh, does it encompass aqeedah? If you look in the works of fiqh, you're not going to find discussions on belief. So when they add that word, it is even in the Sharia, we exclude it. Right? For example, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, مَن يُرِدِ اللَّهُ بِهِ خَيْرًا يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. That whoever Allah wants goodness for, He gives them التفقه في الدين, like understanding in the deen. And doesn't this also encompass like belief, right? Like he needs to have belief. But the scholars, when they talk about this fiqh, they say this is not what we're going to be discussing. The only thing we're going to be discussing is the ahkam of the Sharia that like we have to enact. There has to be action that comes with it. For example, the things that you deal with here is niyyah, making niyyah. For Salatul Maghrib, is it wajib? Is reading Surah Al-Fatiha in the Salah, is it wajib? We all know that you have to read Surah Al-Fatiha for your prayer. But what if somebody comes to you and he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَقْرَأُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنْهُ. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, when you're praying, to recite like whatever you can from it. Whatever you can, what Allah has made easy for you, recite it in the Salah. Is Fatiha something, if it's not made easy for me, can I use this proof to say that you don't have to recite Fatiha? There's no wujub of, like it's not wajib for you to recite Fatiha in the Quran. Right? Or like in your Salah, things like that. So this is what this ahkam fiqh, these are the type of things that it deals with. Right? And what he does in this meaning, and this will be the end before we move to our new thing, we talked about ijtihad. Ijtihad, it is striving in order for you to get to the proofs of the things that you claim, as well as like what were the conditions that were laid for you to exercise ijtihad. Every single one of us here can practice ijtihad, right? I can tell you today, go and prove to me that we have to have niyyah when we do any action. You can go and spend a month and a half researching this, and then getting back to me and say, according to my ijtihad, this is what I have found. But this ijtihad that is mentioned here, it has to be faster than that, right? It has to be something that is like you either already know it because of how much you've immersed yourself in this knowledge, or if we give you a short period of time, you're going to find it. So this is the ijtihad that is going to be done in a short time, where you can come with a ruling that you understand that these are the proofs for why I'm saying these things. And what this does here is that it distinguishes the people into two groups. You have the fuqaha, the people that can practice ijtihad, and you have the muqallidin, the people that we follow whatever they tell us. And if you cannot do the ijtihad that is mentioned here, you are from the followers. Any questions here? Alhamdulillah. So all of us, majority of the people, this is where they fall into. And then there's also another discussion on, is there even such a thing as ijtihad in our time? Can somebody make ijtihad today, right? Based on how much information has already been laid down. What new rulings really come up to where we have to exercise ijtihad and say, you know what? This is the ruling and we have to follow this person's ijtihad if we are from the followers. Inshallah, put the book into that. Now we go to the new page. This is page number 2. And all of this will be, inshallah, new things. So he says, he told you that al-fiqh is ma'rifatul ahkam al-shar'iyya. Now he has to tell you what that ahkam is. And he says, wal ahkamu sab'ah. He said the rulings are 7. He says, al-wujub, al-wajib wal-mandub wal-mubah wal-mahdhur wal-makruh wal-sahih wal-batil. And he says that these 7 are wajib. He'll explain each single one of them. So we'll just say wajib, what obligations. Al-mandub, we know it, most people will know it as sunnah, nafil, and things like that. Wal-mubah, the permissible things. Wal-mahdhur, and the mahdhur is haram, things that we shouldn't be doing. Wal-makruh, things that are disliked. Wal-sahih wal-batil, and the things that are authentic, that are correct, and things that are batil, things that are false. So al-ahkam in the Sharia sense, it's broken down into 2 parts. There's two types of ahkam that you find in the Sharia. You have at-taklifiyya and al-wad'iyya. At-taklifiyya are the things that like we have to do, right? It is the khitabullah, like what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked from the al-muta'allaq bifi'l al-mukallaf, like things that the one that is responsible has to do, what Allah has commanded a person to do. And this is like the definition that they give. And the mukallaf, it is someone that is baligh, has reached the age of maturity. And someone that is aqil, someone that is like his mental capabilities are all there for him to function. And al-dhakir, someone that is like he knows, right? He is like aware. Now, what this does right away for us, right? Because this is all about who's included in something and who's not included. The children, this does not concern them. This ahkam that we're talking about does not have to do with someone that has not become baligh. So all the children are out of this. We're not going to be talking about things that pertain to them. Al-aqil excludes who? The one that has all of them, like he is sound, right? His mind is sound. He's in good health mentally. It excludes all the majnun. All of the people that their mental capabilities are not there. So this does not have to do with the one that's not there, right? The one that mentally is not there. The one that has, like he's not sane, right? All of the insane are removed from this. Allah's commandments that we're going to be talking about here, the ahkam, these 7, we don't deal with them. They do not deal with them. And then al-dhakir is the one that is like remembers, right? Now, this dhakir, even the one that forgets, he is included in this, but they just put this there like he shouldn't be someone that's constantly forgetting, right? The one that is all of his mental capabilities are there. On top of that, like they function to this degree of he remembers things, like he knows things, right? Now, one thing that's not mentioned here, it is Islam, right? Islam is missing from here. The reason why Islam is missing from here, to the people of Usul al-Fiqh, your deen has no bearing on what Allah has commanded you to do. Meaning everybody that falls into these 3, he is responsible. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to pray the salah, it is not only a khitab, a command, or a speech that is made towards the believers. It is made to anyone that is baligh and he's aqil and he's dhakir. If you fall into this, You're being commanded. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So this is the ahkam of al-taklifi. The other one is al-wad'iyya. Al-wad'iyya basically means that, the laws that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed down to make it a sabab, right? He makes it sabab like a reason, or he makes it a shart, a condition, or he makes it a mani', something that stops it. For example, we have to make wudu right now. We know that wudu is wajib upon us in order to pray salah. That it's al-wad'iyya, right? For what? For salah that we have to perform. So this ahkam would deal with, al-wad'iyya deals with the sabab of why do we have to have tahara? We have to have it in order to pray. And in it, you find things like if you're inside of your house, you have to turn on the water in order to make wudu. You have to turn on the water in order to make wudu. Now that falls into al-wad'iyya, the ahkam al-wad'iyya. Like you have to do that now in order to make wudu. Right? It becomes a sabab for you doing the taklifi things that you've been asked to do. Right? Or they're conditions like the tahara or facing the qibla. Right? These are not taklifiyya, but they're al-wad'iyya. Right? These are things like have to happen there before you could do these things. Out of these 7 that he mentioned, only 2 of them really deal with the al-wad'iyya, which is as-sahih wal-batil. And he is the only one that places Imam al-Juwayni these together in this form. And there's usually another one that is excluded that we're going to be talking about. But you have like wajib are in things that I have to do. These are things that are wajib upon me, and I have to do them. Then you look at like as-sahih. Is this really like how do I understand sahih? This wajib that I'm doing, there are conditions, and there are things that would break those conditions that have been put there. So that needs to be fulfilled. Like wudu, we wash our hands, face, the order. If that is there, if I don't do those things, then it becomes batil. That wudu that I did becomes batil. Right? So this is how we differentiate these 2. Now, al-ahkam as-sab'a, he says they're 7. 5 for one, and then 2 for 5 for the first one, and the 2 for al-wad'iyya. Then he says al-wajib. He says the first one is al-wajib.
You're saying the wajib, mandub, mubah, makruh, makruh is taklifiyya, sahih al-batil,
al-wad'iyya. He is the only one that puts it this way. Majority of like the usuliyin, they separate these into, this is al-taklifiyya and this is al-wad'iyya. Then he says al-wajib. Imam al-Juwayni, when he wrote this book, we said that it is a few pages that comprises of like small, just masail. Obviously, he's writing it for the beginner. This is for somebody that is taking the first step into learning usul al-fiqh. This is what you want to look at. So the things that he gives, the definitions and the wordings that he uses, they're different than what like the second level of usul al-fiqh, if we were to take one, it would use. For example, he says al-wajib. If you look in the shuruhat, like the explanation of this, they say this is not the word that he should have used. Right? He shouldn't have used al-wajib, because al-wajib is not from the 7. What would have been better here, it is al-ijab. Al-ijab. Because when we look at wajib, you have al-ijab, wujub, and wajib. All of these 3 mean different things at different points. Al-ijab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tells us, aqimu as-salah, wa aqimu as-salah. This here, it is Allah is making salah wajib. And at that point, it would be ijab. At that point, it would be ijab. Then the person looks at it and he says, Allah has told me to establish the prayer. Now I can say that salah is wujub. Salah, wujub. The wujub of salah is established through here. Then he does it. Now he has fulfilled what is he doing? The wajib of salah. Is that clear? Okay, let's go again. When Allah commands it to pay the zakat, that's the ijab. The command of Allah is ijab. When we establish that zakat is, we have to do it, wujub. We are establishing the wujub of zakat. When we are doing it, we are fulfilling the wajib. Okay? So they say the wording that he should have used here to get the same meaning that he gets from all of the other ones, it is ijab instead of wajib. But again, we said this is for the beginner. The beginner is not going to look at it and know the difference between ijab and wajib. He's not going to be able to say this is what ijab is, and this is what wujub is, and this is what wajib is. But he will know what wajib is. And he's going to tell you what that is. And because this is concerning the individual, he can know, like, what he has to do is what he's concerned about. And then al-mandub, this is, like we said, this is like things that are sunnah. And we'll go through the different things. These 7, it is what the jumhur follow. What the jumhur of the scholars, majority of the scholars, this is the ahkam al-sab'a that they have. When we said that, what does jumhur mean when we said last time we were together? Who is it applying to? Who are we saying? When we say majority of the scholars, we're applying to like the 3 schools. Right, we're talking about the 3 schools, the scholars in those 3 schools. Imam Malik, Shafi'i, and Ahmed. Whenever you hear that, this is
and Maliki.
Al-Maliki, yes. So he said Imam Malik. So Imam Malik, Imam Ahmed, and Imam Shafi'i. Whenever we say the majority opinion on any ruling, whenever we say majority opinion, you are talking about these 3 schools. Why? Because of the foundations that they have are similar, and this is what they came to. And out of 4, 3 is the majority. Only sometimes you would find, like whenever it is the opinion of the Hanafi school, they'll make sure to mention the Jumhur, and they'll exclude someone from there, and they'll add, they'll say, this is who it is talking about now. And they'll have the views of the Hanafi. And you can see it just from the listing. There's one that is like we are familiar with that's not here, which is fard. Right? Fard is missing something. And the reason is, to the Jumhur, wajib and fard mean the same thing. They're the same exact thing. You have the fard and wajib mean exactly the same. In the Hanafi madhab, they're different things. Fard is the meaning that we gave of it being wajib. Wajib is what they used for the sunnah mu'akkada, right? Sunnah that are like strongly emphasized. And they say that is wajib. That's why you'll find, like for example, in our madhab or in the Jamhur madhab, we would never say witr or qiyam al-layl is wajib. We would never say that. But to our Hanafi brothers, it is wajib. Praying witr is wajib. Praying the sunnah after salah is wajib. Right? For us, this is mandub. This is from the sunnah, the Jamhur. But they have these 2 different things. And even at the end, the mahdhur to them also has 2 distinctions. They have at-tanzih, right? And then they have at-tahrim. So I mean, when it comes to the makruh, they have makruh at-tanzih and makruh at-tahrim. And this is really going to be the only place where we mention these, like, these the differences in the school. And the rest of the time, we're just going to go into the definitions that are provided. At-tanzih wa at-tahrim. So makruh at-tahrim. At-tahrim. Right? Makruh at-tahrim is like you have disliked. Right? Makruh are things that are disliked. For example, in the Jumhur, eating standing, or not drinking standing, or eating, when you lean on, like you muttakiya, like
leaning on your side.
Leaning on your side, right? Like you lean on your side and this is something that's makruh, something that is disliked. Or going over 3 when you're making wudu, right? When you're washing your hands, going over 3, like intentionally. This is makruh. In the Hanafi madhab, Makruh is divided into two parts. One that is the same as haram, makruh at-tahrim, but because of a like foundation that they have, which states that haram can only be ما حرم الله ورسوله, what Allah and His Messenger have made haram. Ijtihad cannot tell you what haram is. It has to like specifically be stated by Allah or His Messenger. So they invented al-makruh al-tahrim for that. Because we said their fatawa or their usul foundations are built on the fatawa that were existing. The Jamahir, they took the fatawa and they extracted the foundations from there. Right? And that's why you have these differences.
So what would be the difference between tahrim and mahdhur then?
So mahdhur, like the makruh, for them mahdhur is only what Allah has made haram and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So for example, a popular one for them, like usually that comes up, is if you were to go and ask somebody about the hukm of smoking cigarettes, we would tell you it's haram. What would our brothers in the Hanafi madhab say? That is makruh. Why? Because Allah and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said it was haram. But they had to invent like another makruh that is like gives you the understanding of it being that level of haram. So they call it makruh at-tahrim. Right? Makruh at-tahrim. And which is they would have, instead of the like 7 that we have here, they would have 9. They would have the fard at the top and the makruh would have 2 additional ones. All right. Now let's go to each word. He has told us each of the words, all of the rulings. Now he's going to define it.
I'm sorry, I'm mixed up here.
Okay.
Mahdhur and makruh.
Mahdhur is haram. Makruh are the disliked things.
Yeah, that's what I understand normally, but the order here is backwards.
Yeah, so he puts it differently in the when he's defining.
That's what I was thinking.
So like, why is
Something
it
wrong here.
no? So it's in the writing. Usually you have like the wajib, then you have the mandub, then you have the mubah, then you have makruh, and then haram.
Yeah.
Right, but he knows the other.
So mahdhur is what we
haram.
normally
Mahrum.
in other books is called haram.
Haram, yeah. So that's he used. So even like the wording that he used, all of them like look at the structure of the word itself. Right, he goes mandub. Then he says mubah. And then he was like, instead of going mahrum, let's go with the better word of mahdhur. Right, so that's how like he wanted to structure it together. And then makruh. So now he says wal wajib. He said, told you wajib before. Now he wants to tell you what it means. He says ما يثاب على فعله ويعاقب على تركه. He said wajib. The definition he's giving. He says it is the thing that you're going to be rewarded if you do it. And you're going to be punished if you don't do it. Is this the definition of wajib? Not really, right? He's giving you the definition of like what's going to happen, right? For example, you come to me and you ask me, like, what's a basketball? You say, what is a 3-point shot? And I'll tell you it's a shot that if you make it, you get 3 points, right? If you make it, you get 3 points. I've answered the question. I've told you what it is, but do you now understand what a 3-point shot is? You just know like a portion of it. You know that if I make it, I'm going to get 3 points. But if I were to tell you, these are the lines for it. If you shoot from anywhere behind this line, this is what it is. Like now you have like a better understanding. Here he's looking at you as we are beginners. And what you have to understand about wajib, it is that if you do it, you get rewarded. If you don't do it, you get punished. But what it actually means, it is a command of Allah that you like, it's a definite command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you have to do it. That you have to do it. Right? It is like you need to do this thing. Mandatory, right? Like Allah is telling you and you don't have any choice. Like you have to do it. Then he gives you the 2 things, right? If you look at all of the things, he's telling you what is excluded from wajib. If you say something is wajib, he says, ما يثاب على فعله. If you do it, you're going to be rewarded for it. Automatically, you take out mubah. Things that are mubah cannot be wajib. Automatically, you take out makruh. Because if you do makruh, you're not going to be rewarded for doing it. And then you take out halal, you take out the mahdhur. So with this definition, he's excluding what else could go into it. And then he goes, وَيُعَاقَبُ عَلَى تَرْكِهِ, that if you leave it, you're going to be rewarded. You're going to be punished if you leave this off. You're going to be punished. If he was to just say that wajib is مَا يُعَاقَبُ عَلَى تَرْكِهِ, that you're going to be punished if you left it off, we would have the complete understanding for it. Like we would know. If you leave this off, you're going to be punished. So now, wajib, when we talk about wajib, there's like different ways of breaking it down. There is, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Allah, He says, that siyam, right? Fasting has been made wajib upon you. We know that fasting here is talking about the month of Ramadan. The entire time, we have to be fasting. From morning to night, from sunrise, even though it's not sunrise, but it's a sunrise, to sundown, we have to fast. So this entire time is restricted. And then you have other things in which the time is not restricted. For example, you have birrul walidayn, being dutiful to your parents. This is, you can do it in the morning, you can do it in the afternoon, you can do it at night time. Then you have things like salah. The time of dhuhr, we'll say from dhuhr to asr. You don't have to be praying the entire time. You just pray it and, until the command is fulfilled. Fulfilling dhuhr. So this is when it comes to time, this is how they're broken up to. On top of that, you have it like wajib. You have two angles of on the individual and then on the community. And you have wajib that is aini, like everyone has to do it. Adhan comes for dhuhr time. Adhan comes right now for dhuhr time. If 4 of us prayed, can you guys say we don't have to pray? They've already finished it. No, because we all have to pray. And this is wajib aini, or fardu ain, right? Fardu ain. And then you have fard kifaya, or wajib kifaya. And what does this mean? It means that if some of us do it, the rest of us don't have to do it. An example is janazah, praying the salat al-janazah. If somebody prays salat al-janazah on a Muslim, because this is a right that we have to fulfill, the rest of us don't have to do it. As well as the washing, the burial, the covering. These are all things that are wajib, that we have to do when someone passes away. But not all of us have to do it. Another example, seeking knowledge. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم. That seeking knowledge is fard upon every Muslim. Does this mean that we all have to seek knowledge? No, it means if some of us do it, the rest of us, we don't have to do it. Is this clear? So in terms of like responsibility of who has to do it, it is broken down into 2. The one that all of us have to do it, like fasting, like salah, and these things, all of us have to do it. No one is excused from doing it. And then you have things that if some of us do it, the rest of us don't have to do it. But there are some times where even the fara'id that we look at as being kifaya, one of it does it and the rest don't have to do it, will fall on everybody. Like everyone, there's times where it becomes like we all have to do it. Right? Like, for example, let's say that we are in a time where there's extreme hunger. And Allah has blessed us with wealth. And we'll say this is the entire ummah. Right? We're the only ones. And we're all been blessed and we see that everyone else is suffering. And then it doesn't just become that one does it, everything falls off everybody. We all would have to do it. But even though the feeding of the poor is something that is actually just is mandub, right? Something that's emphasized that we should be doing it. But and then if it even reaches the first level of wajib is going to reach would be it will become like kifaya. If one of us does it, the rest of us are okay. Then in some cases, it goes all the way to the top. So you have it, in that type of that breakage, you have the time where the time is vast and you can do it at any time. And this is al-muwassa. You do it in the beginning of the day, the middle of the day, in the middle of the night, like birrul walidain, silatul rahim, connecting the family ties and so on. And then one is like you have to do it the entire time, has to be in this ibadah, like fasting, like when you're at Hajj. And then you have somewhere, if you just do the portion in the time that you're told to do it, you don't have to do the rest of the time, like salah. Any questions on the wajib? So it is the khitab of Allah, yani jaziman, like you have to do it. Like right, you have to do it. And then he goes to the next one, and he says, al-mandub. He says, ma yuthabu ala fi'lihi. This is things that if you do, you're going to be rewarded. When you do it, you're going to be rewarded. وَلَا يُعَاقَبُ عَلَى تَرْكِهِ. And if you don't do it, you're not going to be punished. Right away, وَلَا يُعَاقَبُ takes out haram. Haram cannot be things that if you were, or even it takes, وَلَا يُعَاقَبُ عَلى تَرْكِهِ also takes out what? Wajib. Mandub is not wajib. Like it takes it out. Ma yuthabu ala fi'lihi still includes what? Wajib. Right? But it takes out al-haram wal-makruh wal-mubah. Those are excluded from here. Mandub. Now what does this mean? It is still a matlub of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, غير جازم, without it being like you have to do it. You have the option of, am I going to do it or am I not going to do it? Some of the things that fall into here is you have like the sunnah after the prayers, the 12 throughout the day. You have qiyamul layl. You have adhkar. Like a lot of things that fall into the mandub. That if you were to do them, Allah is going to reward you. But if you, let's say you didn't pray the sunnah, then you're not going to be punished for not doing it. Right? Allah is not going to say you didn't do this thing. And
like recommended.
These are the recommended things. For example, like another word for it that the people know is anything that's sunnah, anything that is nafi, but like the extra things. We're encouraged to do it because we're going to get rewarded. And we're also encouraged to do it because it is going to allow us to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we know in the Hadith Qudsi. The more nafil that you do, the easier it becomes, like the closer you're going to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But leaving it off is not going to be something that you're punished for. But if somebody leaves off all of the mandub, there's something wrong with them. If he leaves off every single mandub, there is something like the people will look at and say there's a deficiency in this person. Because if you're doing just the wajib, how come it's not leading you to do something extra, right? This ibadah that you're engaging in, where's the thamar that's coming from it to where you're going to do the next thing? For example, someone doesn't have to pray. There's 12 rak'ahs of sunnah that we like 12 units of sunnah that we pray. Someone doesn't have to pray all 12, right? And this is just in the daytime, like attached to the salawat. But if he never prays them, then it's like, okay. Like fasting, there's no time outside of Ramadan that we have to fast. But if you see Ashura is coming, you see Arafah is coming, you see, the 3 white days, you see the Mondays and Thursdays, and you have no share in like these type of things, then it's like, okay. Like the 6th fasting of Shawwal, things like that. There's like, there's something there that needs to be corrected. So that is what mandub is. And then another one is like, one that we all practice is, the tashahhud, the first one, salah that we do. This is from the recommended acts from the mandub. When you're fasting, for example, Ramadan, suhoor, this is from the sunnah, right? To eat suhoor, things that are mandub that you're going to be rewarded for. So if someone like says, forget this whole, forget the first tashahhud, there is something that needs to be corrected. Any questions here on the mandub?
So it's all right to just do Ramadan without suhoor.
So you don't have to have suhoor in order to fast that day, right? But تسحروا فإن في السحور بركة. Take your suhoor because in it is barakah. Right? So we want like the entire purpose of the ibadat, of the worship that we're given, we're doing them to get some reward, right? That's the reason why we're doing it, or to avoid some punishment. So when we get all of these rewards, how can I maximize the reward that I'm getting from these actions that I'm doing? Ramadan, the Prophet was telling you there's barakah in your suhoor. That means you're going to get rewarded for taking it. So let me do it and then let me fast. But if you wake up in the middle of the day, you miss fajr, you miss suhoor, you don't say, today I didn't have my suhoor, there's no fasting for me, right? But it's like you just continue fasting. You don't have to have suhoor in order to fast. Any other questions here? Then he says, wal mubah. Now he goes to the next one. And then he says, mubah, what it means is, ما لا يثاب على فعله. It is not, if you do it, you're not going to be rewarded for it. You're not going to gain ajr for it. ولا يعاقب على تركه. And if you do leave it, you're not going to be punished for it. This is like a general understanding he's giving us. Anything that is mubah, right? And I'm pretty sure that we all know this. Generally, they say everything is in the state of al-ibaha, outside of the ibadah, until it becomes clear that it's not. Right? Before we got to this, there was ikhtilaf on, like, how do we as Muslims proceed in things that have not been mentioned to be halal or haram? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he told us, إن الحلال بين والحرام بين وبينهما أمور مشتبهات. He says, the halal is clear. The haram is clear. In between them, there are things that are gray. We'll go here. Like there's like, they're just in between this gray area. And this gray area, in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us, like to stay away from it. Right? Whoever stays away from it, like he's protected his honor and his dignity. Like he himself. Now, there's scholars that looked at this and they said, if the thing is not clearly stated to be halal or haram, we practice caution with it. We stay away from it until we can say it falls into one of these two things. So they say not everything is mubah until proven, but so they took the understanding everything is haram until you could prove to me that it's halal. Until you could prove to me that it's halal, everything is haram. You don't really see, especially now in America, people that have this understanding. Right? The understanding we have is everything is halal until you could prove to me it's haram. And of course, this is outside of ibadah. We can't have this type of thinking inside of ibadah. So these are things that are outside, right? For example, things that don't have to do with us worshiping. And this is the majority of the scholars, this is the opinion that they have. Everything is halal until it can be proven to you that it is haram. But also, it can't just be, I don't know it's halal or haram. Therefore, it's halal to me. Right? Like there has to be like a level of understanding. So things that scholars, when they mention mubah, that they usually talk about are things that like we can't survive without them. Like sleeping, eating, drinking. These are things that we have to do. Right? And whether you sleep or not, you leave off sleep, you're not going to be punished for it. If you sleep, you're not going to be rewarded for it. Unless, there's two ways this is going to like, mubah, like it's in the middle and it goes up and down. It goes to the things you're going to be rewarded for and it goes to the things you're going to be punished for. If somebody goes to sleep, and the reason why he's sleeping is to wake up the next day and have the strength to be able to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is no longer just, you're not going to be punished for this sleep now. Like this sleep is just mubah. It's even that sleep of yours is going to be punished. The rest that you take, you're going to be punished for it. That food that you're drinking, the food that you're eating, the drink that you're drinking, in order to get, the ability to do haram, it's leading you to haram, is going to be something you're going to be punished for. What does that say? I think it's on. All right, or it's closing.
That's a notification for
Yeah,
you.
just ignore everything. Right. So, but if somebody, let's say, goes to sleep after Isha, and he goes with the intentions of, I'm going to sleep now to wake up in order to pray Qiyam al-Layl, even his sleep is going to be rewarded. Right? Or if somebody just says, I need to sleep so I can get rested to live my life, he's not going to be punished or rewarded. So this is how we look at the things that are ibaha when there is. When things are mubah, you look at it, how am I doing this?
Intention.
Yeah, the intention of how, like, what's the purpose of it? If you're in, like, there's a possibility for you to get rewarded even for the actions that are mubah, and there's a possibility of you getting punished for the actions that are even mubah. Is this clear? Based on the intentions that you have made. And if you make no intentions for them, then they fall into this understanding. Doing them does not get you rewarded, leaving them off does not get you punished. Right? And there are many things that fall into this. Any questions here?
What's the main distinction between mandub and mubah?
So mandub is ma yuthabu ala fi'lihi. If you do it, you get rewarded. Mubah, if you do it, you don't get rewarded. Whether you do it or not, there's no reward that in itself is attached to the thing. But your intentions and how you go about it has the, what it has there. Any other question?
How would you like describe it simply? What mubah is?
So something that there's no prohibition for or command for it.
Like it doesn't have like a small.
Yeah.
example.
Like there's no command to do it,
Yeah.
and there's no command to leave it.
Mhm.
Has Allah told us to take rest at night? Has Allah told us to drink and eat? Outside of the ibadah, has the Prophet ﷺ told us to do those things? You look at it, you're like, well, did he tell me to drink water from this water bottle? Did he tell, things like that? It's like, okay, there's no like inherent prohibition against it or the command for it. That is what is ibah, like mubah, this is what it deals with. And because of that, of how you drink your water. But if you were to even replace, like, for example, there are things that in eating and in drinking, even though the act itself of eating and drinking, this is mubah, there are things that are haram in it itself, right? Like the type of drinks, the type of eating, and so on. So it's just it, like the action itself doesn't have any command for it or any prohibition against it. That's how they describe it. And then we go to al-mahdhur. What we're going to do here is we're going to flip our thing around. And we're going to go to makruh. We're going to cover makruh and then finally mahdhur, how generally it is covered. So skip one line down. Right. So the next line he says, wal makruh ma yuthabu ala tarkihi. That if you are to leave it, you're going to be rewarded for it. If you leave it, you're going to be rewarded for it. And then he says, وَلَا يُعَاقَبُ عَلَى فِعْلِهِ. And you are not going to be punished, or you're not going to be punished for leaving it. No, for doing عَلَى فِعْلِهِ. You're not going to be punished for doing it. And makruh, this understanding, it is only restricted to how the fuqaha use it, how the people of fiqh use it. For example, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, in a hadith, he says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَرِهَ عَلَيْكُمْ الْقِيلَ وَالْقَالَ. That Allah hates upon you, like a lot of sayings, like spreading rumors and things like that, right? Can we say that if I engage in this thing, it means that I'm not going to be, me acting upon it, there's no punishment for it. Right? No, we can't. That's not. This is a different ikrah here. It means this is haram. When Allah hates something, it means that thing is haram. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Isra, there's a page that's dedicated to all of the major sins that you see people engage in. And then at the end of the page, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, all of these things, عند ربك مكروها. These are things that are hated. It's makruh in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The verse is وَلَا تَمْشِ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا, like don't walk on the ground, with arrogance. وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ, don't kill the thing. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الزِّنَا. All of these major sins are there. And then at the end, what does it say? All of these are things that are makruh to you, Lord. And this doesn't mean this makruh that we're talking about here. That means haram there. Those things are haram. But when all of these things that we are going through, it is only the understanding of the people of fiqh, usul al-fiqh, and fiqh. This is their understanding of these words, right?
So if Allah said that those things are haram and he used the word makruh, then why would the Fuqaha have a different definition?
So their definition is based on, we look at these words and those ones are excluded, but how do we describe these actions which are disliked to us? What's the word that we are going to use? And they say makruh, right? Things that are disliked. And that is even different. This understanding is not how we would use, like in regular terminology, things that we dislike. If something is makruh to me, or to you, or to whoever, you're not going to, if someone says, what does that mean to you? You're not going to say, if I do this thing, that this is something that I'm going to not be punished for it, but if I stay away from it, I'm going to be rewarded. You're not going to say that, right? So when they use these words, it's just understand that these are words that we as the people of fiqh are using. For example, there's one thing that we're going to cover, like, actually here it says, what's sahih? Sahih. What's the definition? We'll say authentic. It says ما يتعلق به النفوذ ويعتد به. Like, we'll get to this later. But this definition, if we open a book of hadith and saw that it said sahih, would this be the definition that it would have? No. Even the same word. But this is the word that they, like, when they have these terminologies, they've gone together and said, this is the understanding of this word. This is the understanding that we're using in this context. And that's why we would always have, like, there's ways for you to look at like language that is used in Islamic sciences. You have the way of just looking at it from a lughawi perspective, from the language perspective, and then you have the Shar'i perspective. Is that? For example, when I say siyam, fasting, I get the question. When I say fasting, what way do you understand siyam? Ramadan, right? The fasting morning to night. When in the Quran, for example, right? When Maryam, when she says, "Inni nadartu lirrahmani sawma," what does this sawma mean? This fasting here, what does this mean? And see, like, the thing that the oath I've taken with Allah, it is like the linguistic meaning of fasting, of sawm, which is imsak, like to hold yourself off of something. And her holding off is, I'm not going to talk to anybody, basically, right? So this is the lughawi usage of it. But when we say it, what do we mean? It means Ramadan from morning to night, sunrise to sunset, right? Not sunrise, but we just use that for our understanding.
Let me just help clarify.
Mhm.
You have to also distinguish between when Allah says something is makruh to Allah,
Mhm.
it's not the same as you and I say that, right? You dislike something, but you don't have control of everything, right? So it may happen, or you may do it, or it will happen to you.
Mhm.
But when Allah says this, Allah is giving us an edict. This is, don't approach this. This is something, because if Allah hates something, then it's big. But for us, it's a different meaning. From that perspective. And I think how he's describing it is just he's using a term and he's saying this is the definition of the term. So we understand it within this context of the definition.
So, like, the actual definition they give for makruh, it is al-khitab, the command of Allah that is attached to al-muta'alliq bi-talabi tark al-fi'li min al-mukallaf talaban ghayra jaziman. Like, you're being asked to stay away from this without it being like you have to stay away from it. Like, you should stay away from these things. Makruh, some of the things that are makruh, like we said, increasing 3 times, blowing into your drinking utensils, leaving off tahiyyat al-masjid. Things like that, these are makruh to us. To the Jumhur, these are some of the things that are makruh. Your question.
In this context,
Mhm.
but basically
Mhm.
it's not up to like our ijtihad, right?
All of these are the ways which you get, like, these are the rulings of ijtihad themselves. You will get to one of these 7 or one of these 5, plus you do 1 or 2 of the next 2, to make sure it falls into it. Right? So like the things that are wajib that he's talking about here, he's talking about through ijtihad, this is where we have placed it. Right? This is where we have come to place them. So through our ijtihad, these are the things that are makruh. One of them, we said, some of the things that we mentioned, tahiyyatul masjid. Praying tahiyyatul masjid when you go and praying 2 rak'ahs. When they looked at all of the other evidence, they said it can be wajib, right? It can be something that is like, we have to do it every time we go to the masjid. But it's also something that like, we shouldn't leave off. Like this is something that we should be doing. And usually makruh here would always like leaving off any of the mandub would become like the makruh. For example, when we clean ourselves after using the bathroom, what hand do we use? Our left hand. What happens if I use the right hand? Is using the left hand wajib, or is it mandub, or is it mubah? Or is it makruh, or is it haram? What do you guys think? When you use your left, it's mandub. Because when the fuqaha looked at all of the evidences, they couldn't like conclude, you definitely have to use it with the left hand. So they make using the left hand as mubah, so that would make using the right hand what? Makruh. Which is different than eating. Right? Than eating. Eating, we eat with our right hand. Is it wajib to eat with your right hand? Or can you eat with your left hand? Wajib. You have to eat with your right hand. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ, one, there's a command, and we're going to look at how you even look at commands. And then there's also a punishment that is attached, or a description of the people that eat with the left hand. But what if somebody's left-handed and they can't eat with their right hand? Does that switch the thing, like from the way they clean themselves to this thing, or is it going to stay the same? 100 baht? Talk about it next week, inshallah. Okay. So what was your question? Did your question get answered?
Yeah.
Okay. So makruh, anything that is mandub, the opposite of it is makruh, disliked. And if somebody does disliked actions over and over and over and over and over, they should fear for themselves. Things that are makruh are things that like we should try to avoid them as much as we can.
But there's no punishment for doing
For doing makruh acts. Yeah.
you don't get punishment.
No, like if you were, for example, we said blowing into your drink. This is something that we have been told not to do by the Prophet. Right? Like when you do this a lot when you're trying to cool down the drink, we should not do this. But doing it, we're not going to be punished. But if we were to leave it and blow into it, we're going to be rewarded for it. All right? Any other questions here on makruh? And if you have questions on Zoom, just ask them. We'll hear the thing and we'll get to your questions. Next one is we're going to go backwards, upward. He says, al-mahdhur. Mahdhur, he says, ma yuthabu ala tarkihi. That if you are to leave it, you are going to be rewarded. If you leave the haram, you're going to be rewarded. وَيُعَاقَبُ عَلَى فِعْلِهِ, and you're going to be punished for doing it. If you do haram, you are going to be punished. And what is the definition that they give for haram? That is not from the point of what you get of doing it. It is the things that Allah has commanded you to stay away from, definitely. Like you have to stay away from it. That is what mahdhur or haram means. Now, haram is things that they come about, a few ways. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us something is haram, we say, khalas, this is haram. The Prophet ﷺ tells us that it is haram, khalas, this is haram. Or the ummah agrees, there's ijma' that this thing is haram. Therefore, we are going to stay away from it. This thing the ummah has decided is haram, therefore it's haram. And when we say ummah, when we say ijma', what we mean is the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If the companions have agreed on something that is haram together, then we say that it is haram. If people come after them and they tell you that something is haram, and they have, proofs from the Quran and the Sunnah to say this thing is haram, and through their ijtihad they have gotten to this, then we say that this is haram. So you have the clearly stated ones by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we know them. For example, وَلَا تَمْشِي فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا. Don't walk on the ground with like a lot of kibr, a lot of arrogance, with pride. And then you have like the known ones, zina. You have khamr, drinking alcohol, like, riba. Like all of these harams, inshallah, we know we stay away from this. Then you have like the haram that, for example, comes up in our times. Did they used to have cigarettes in the time of the Prophet? No, this is something that came later. But why is it haram? One, what do you say? It harms your body. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like one of the purposes of the Sharia is what? To protect your life. And because this is damaging to your life, it's haram. Because you are going against one of like the entire purpose of the Sharia. One of it is the preservation of life. Then you look at like all of the other things that come up and you're like, these are similar to these things that have the ruling of haram. Therefore, they also fall under the same one. Alcohol is not what it used to be during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Completely different now, right? Like so many different types of alcohol. But there was like an understanding that was placed there for anything that intoxicates is haram. Because of that, even if new ways come out of it and it still has this end goal, what happens to it? It takes this ruling. So these are the ways that we define haram. And I don't think we should have any questions. If someone engages in them, they are, haram that are, they're going to be punished for it. And there's really punishment of different levels. There are some actions that are haram that will take you out of the fold of Islam. Example, shirk. This is haram, right? Commit shirk is haram. Doesn't mean if you commit it, your punishment is going to be like a singular thing. Like now you've committed shirk, you've left Islam. So there's those type of things. And then after that, you have like the major sins, the kaba'ir. The kaba'ir are haram without a doubt. But which ones are kaba'ir? What are considered major sins and what are considered minor sins? Even the minor sins are still haram. But there's like the different levels and like things that are attached to it, right? So the major sins, how many are there? 7. The 7 destructive sins, right? If in reality, if we keep looking, like the number just increases, right? Like major sins are a lot, because you have like, for example, you can say عقوق الوالدين is a major sin, right? Being عقوق is the opposite of being dutiful to your parents. Like horrible, the way that you treat your parents. How do we know that it is a kabair? Because the Prophet he said, أَلَا أُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِأَكْبَرِ الْكَبَائِرِ. Should I not tell you about the most major of the major sins? I said, بَلَا يَا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ, of course tell us. And he said, الْإِشْرَاكُ بِاللَّهِ وَعُقُوقُ الْوَالِدَيْنِ وَقَوْلُ الزُّورِ. Right? He mentions 3 things here. The first one is shirk. Shirk is from the major sins, and it takes you out of Islam. And then after that, right away, he mentions عُقُوقُ الْوَالِدَيْنِ. So without a doubt, the fact that it is attached to this means that this is also a major sin. So anything that could be characterized as عقوق الوالدين can fall under it also becomes a major sin, right? And then the minor sins that that usually add up and to destroy a person. They're also still from the mahdur, from the things that are haram, right? Like we have to fear, اتق الذنوب صغيرها وكبيرها. Like fear the sins, fear the haram things, the big ones also, and also the small ones, right? It says, فإن الجبال من الصلب, because the mountains made up of like small pebbles that come together. You have this giant mountain now, right? So even the minor sins that you do, eventually they grow big enough to destroy you. Jazakallah khair for joining us. Assalamu alaikum. Now, any questions here? Any questions on what we have went over? No? How much time do we have? What time is it?
That's 11:17.
Yeah, shut up. They're supposed to be like, hey, it's 11, let's stop. Okay. Khalas, let's do this. Let's do quickly this page, so when we come back, we go straight to the next page. He says, والصحيح هو الباطل. And he says, ما يتعلق به النفوذ ويعتد به في الشرع. He says, الصحيح, and we said this is from الوضعية. And these generally deal with the mu'amalat. The things that we talked about fall into ibadat, into worship. الصحيح generally deal with al-mu'amalat and like how we interact with one another and so on. So he says, for example, it is something that يتعلق به النفوذ, like the rulings, the thamar of what we are agreeing to is being followed upon. For example, you get married, you have nikah. When you do the abd al-nikah, if it is as-sahih, if it is authentic, then whatever is supposed to come after it, you continue with it. For example, you look at when we sell and buy things. If I sell you this book right here, and I tell you, you give me $5, you have this. You give me the $5, that means that me and him, we have to exchange. I give him this book, he gives me the $5. If it is authentic, if it is sahih, this interaction, and his choice was there, and we did it, this is a condition that is authentic. And the ownership of this switches to you, the ownership of the $5 switches to me. Right? Like you actually feel like, like the rulings that come after now go away from it. For example, I've given him the book. I can't tell him what to do with it after I've given it to him. He can't tell me what to do with the $5 that he has given to me. It has completely changed ownership now. When it comes to ibadah, you look at salah, for example. Salah can be authentic, or it can be, it can be sahih, or it can be batil. If you have fulfilled all of the conditions, all of the arkans of the prayer, we would look at your salah and say, this is an authentic prayer. This is a prayer that has followed all of the rulings that were attached to it. All of the things that he had to do or she had to do has been met. And if you do the other side, if you don't fulfill those, we would say it is batil. So what do they mean? It means that if it is authentic, the command for you to do it is no longer there. If I'm told to pray dhuhr and I have fulfilled the salah of dhuhr, all of the conditions of it, there is no need for me to repeat it, and that command of dhuhr is no longer there. But if, let's say, I pray dhuhr without wudu, do I have to repray it again, or do I say, khalas, I prayed it, it's over? No, you have to have wudu in order to pray. And because you prayed without wudu, you did not pray at all. And this is the hukum that it falls under, is al-batil. So because of that, you have to pray dhuhr again. And you have to fulfill all of the conditions. The nikah, when you get married, for example, if the husband dies, if it is an authentic nikah, sahih nikah, the command was authentic, it means that the wife is going to inherit from him. So, but if it wasn't authentic, can she inherit from him? No. So this is how these two things, al-batil and al-sahih, they fall into. There's one that is missing, known as al-fasid. Fasid. He did not put it here because to him, and to majority of the scholars, sahih and batil and fasid mean the same thing. Except in certain places. So majority of the time, something that is batil is also fasid. One of the places, and this is again just to the jumhur. For example, if somebody is performing hajj, and this is really where you know between a hajj that is batil and a hajj that is fasid. Someone becomes a murtad in the middle of hajj. His hajj has become batil. His hajj is done for. There's no continuation of it. then let's say somebody, miss he, when you get out of ihram, complete ihram, you have to do three things. You have to throw the stones, al-aqaba, you have to make tawaf, and you have to cut your hair. When you do these three things, you are completely out of ihram. And when you're completely out of ihram, this means like all of the things that were haram before go back to being halal. If somebody so this is the removing the ihram. If you do two of them, you are like partially out of ihram, but you still have ihram. What happens to a person that him and his wife they have relations without being that first ihram being removed? Their hajj has become fasid. It hasn't become batil. But there's like the corruption in the thing that they have to do things for it, and they don't stop their hajj, but they would continue their hajj. Right? So the hajj would continue. You do the following things, which is different from what we said before. The hajj is completely over when he becomes a mufti. Right? He becomes like he's before he gets to Muzdalifah, he's done some of the things of hajj. He's out of like doing hajj. The one that the fasid is there for him. He has corrupted his hajj, but he continues it, and then there's something he has to do after, and then also next year he'll come back and he'll try to fix the mistake that he has done inside of the hajj. But majority of this time, batil and fasid mean the same thing, except in a few places. And this is to the jumhur, to the three schools we talked about. In the Hanafi madhab, these are two completely different things. We don't have time to go over it. This is something that they discuss in details. Whoever wants you, go to their books, inshallah. Whoever wants to know the differences between these two things, go to their books. Any questions here before we close?
So here the same thing with the word batil here, compared to makruh. Batil here, the Prophet sometimes uses it to be something
that's
really
falsehood.
Right?
Yeah.
But here it's a scientific term.
Yeah, from them.
And that's why they define it.
Yeah,
specifically.
With that. Yeah. So not the batil of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam,
right?
Not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses, not what the people of hadith use, but the people of fiqh. And this is what batil means to them, where it negates everything else that, like, all of the things that are supposed to happen. Like, if you get a nikah that is not valid, if I sell, he sells me something that he doesn't own, and I give him the money, but he doesn't have the thing that he's going to give me. This is a transaction that is valid. I need to get my money back, because he is selling something that he doesn't own, and this is one of the conditions of selling is you have to own the thing that you have. So there's no changing of ownership. If I give him my money and he hasn't fulfilled his part of selling something that he owns, right? So that would become batil, right? So there's no change of ownership. There's no inheritance. There's no being able to come together with relations when you get a nikah that is batil, things like that. And in the ibadat, it means if it is batil, it means that you have to do it again. The obligation was not removed from you. And we have, for example, the Prophet ﷺ, telling somebody that it is batil for them to pray behind the line by themselves. Right? So this means some scholars looked at it, they took this understanding and said the salah does not count. He has to pray again. But all of that, the more we go into here,
so what would be the translation of
so, like, just say the translation of it is like the chain, like there's something that has to come with it. The thamar of it is going to just follow along with it. Right? Like it's attached to
conditions have to be met.
Like it's attached to whatever we were intending to do, like it's attached to this.
Okay.
You get it? Like the khitab that you're asked for is now being fulfilled in this way.
So here nufud means something. It's a difficult word to translate.
Oh, for sure.
And nufud, it means that it continues being
what it is,
what it's supposed to be. In other words, nafad al-aqd means that when you sign a contract with somebody,
you fulfill it.
You talk it over. You say, what does this word mean? How do we do this? How do we do this? How do we do this? You agree? Yes, I agree. I agree. We sign. So when we do that, we say the aqd nafad. That means the aqd is now
fulfilled.
So this is what this means here. We use this word in Arabic in a different way sometimes. We used to be to a person of influence, right? Somebody who has nufud, somebody has influence, right? But here, the meaning here, that means that whatever is done means that this transaction now is fulfilled and is in profit. That's what it
No,
means,
that's what it
right?
means,
That's
yeah.
exactly what
Yeah.
I was trying. Because I was looking at it first, trying to figure out what it is.
Yeah. The whole point is whatever we agree to now it just continues in that way.
And if those aren't met, then it's not.
Yeah. Like you're asked to pray, and you also asked to pray with wudu. If you did it with wudu and you fulfilled all of the things, that thing just continues as if you have done it. Right? Or يعتد به also like in the Sharia, like
It's
it's
considered correct.
this is done. Right? Then the next level, the opposite of it is it doesn't continue. It's not considered to be right. It's not completed. Right? You do a nikah, for example, you do a nikah without having permission of the gardener. You do a nikah without witnesses being there. We engage in a transaction in which I have no choice. Right? If you like, one of the rights that we both have in a transaction is that my choice and your choice. If I say I don't want this, and you force it on me, this is a batil transaction. You seized it from me. You did not purchase it from me, nor that like you forced this upon me. Right? So if that's not clear, then this is a batil thing. And the things that are supposed to happen of you not being able to use this wealth, you being able to go and sell this thing, or you like if you sold me this book and I wanted to go and sell it, I can go do it if our transaction was correct. If our transaction was not correct, I can't go and sell it. Is that clear? Jazakumullah khair. Any other questions?
Say something.